Well, hello everyone. Let's see. Let's make sure the transcript is working. Yes, it is. Excellent. And can all of you see and hear me without issue? Excellent. All right. Today's going to be a fun one. Again, I hope for certainly fun for me, but I hope it's also fun for all of you. We're going to talk about aliens and UFOs, and I just want to preface this with a couple of remarks. One is that uh, I'm afraid this is probably the least updated lecture in my repertoire, at least in terms of the slides, right? Why do I say that? Well, the first time I taught this course was during COVID, actually. And it was completely asynchronous. There were no live lectures. It was just me recording, editing together a lecture, and putting that on YouTube. I've been able to update a lot of my lectures since. This one, not as much as I would like, because I can never really figure out where to go with it. Because there really is so much we could talk about, right? So the reason why this used to be a rather short lecture is because it involved watching both the episode of Cosmos that I have linked on Brightspace, Encyclopedia Galactica, as well as a very old television documentary on the ancient astronaut hypothesis. And then obviously, I'm not going to require you to watch that, but we will talk about the ancient astronaut hypothesis a little bit. We'll also talk about UFOs and UAPs. We'll talk a little bit about abductions. Lots of different ways we could go, and I can never really settle on which one I want to. So I just kind of have a bunch of stuff here that I just, riff on, kind of like I did last time, but we'll be doing more of that today. So we'll be doing some lecturing, some discussion. I'd really like to get some discussion going today. Um, we might at toward the end of the lecture take a little break from the slides and watch a short piece on how to fake a UFO. And of course, we'll wrap things up after that. Then we'll move on to discuss some special topics ideas because we really do need to come up with a list of potential topics for everybody to vote on. All right, before I go to this slide, actually, before I go to the next slide, when we talk about various things that you might see in the sky, I'm curious. Has anyone ever seen a UFO or, a UAP? If not one of those, have you ever looked up and seen something in the sky where you're like, I'm not sure what that is? Even if it's just for a second. I really hope somebody has. Um, it might not necessarily be an alien spacecraft, but it might be something interesting. And if you don't know what it is, well, I guess technically that's a UFO or a UAP. Yeah, Zach, anything. Yeah, Zach says anything can be a UFO if you're really bad at identifying things. Fair enough. Kaya says yes. I figured it was just some weird piece of man-made technology I can't see properly. Fair. Does anyone want to tell us a little bit more? Yeah, Martha, I get it. I've kind of always wanted to see a UFO too. Because I think it would be neat. But everything in the sky that I've seen, I've had a pretty good idea of what it is. And if not, then I was able to soon find out what it was, right? Leo, yeah, that's clever. Parents are funny that way, huh? Oh, an essay question. We have an essay question from Jasmine. I'm sure this question was answered and I most likely missed it, but I'm wondering if we need in-text citations for the essay proposal or just the reference page. Yes, I would like some kind of in-text citations for the proposal. What those look like depends on the style you're using, right? If you're using Chicago style, you're going to have footnotes with your information in the footnote. MLA and APA, parenthetical referencing. But yes, I would like that. Um, when you're quoting or paraphrasing, you should have the author's name, year of publication and page numbers. And if you're just referring to something, you can just have author's name, year of publication. Um, and I don't know if up here if Jasmine and Holly are saying yes, you can hear me, or yes, you have seen a UFO. Maybe Holly has seen a UFO. Her answer came a little bit later. But for Holly or Kaya or anybody really, have you ever, yeah, like what was it like? What did you see? Okay, so Holly says big bright light traveling fast, no sound, seemed low. Check for where the ISS and Starlink satellites were, and they were nowhere near. Furthermore, the ISS takes longer to go over the sky. I don't know what it was, but it was really memorable. Interesting, yeah. Um, I would say, obviously, I can't deduce what it is, not having seen it, right? But it does sound like an artificial satellite. It's possible, like you say, even if the ISS um, or the Starlink satellites were not moving overhead, it is possible to have seen another sort of satellite. Oh, there's a plane above it. Oh, interesting. So, yeah, I wonder what that could have been. It could have been a natural phenomenon of some kind or an artificial phenomenon, like Leo says, a drone. Could be something natural. Um, Even if it is aliens, I would still say that that's a combination of natural and artificial, isn't it? Because aliens would be natural life forms, but I suppose they'd be coming here in some kind of spacecraft, which would be an artificial thingy. Um, Tristan saw a massive purple light in the sky at 2 a.m. Interesting. Was it kind of like what Holly is describing, where it moves across the sky without sound, or was it more like boom, big purple light and then it went away? While you answer, Kaya says blinking lights moving oddly. Oh, that's weird. Not in a straight line like a plane or satellite. Yeah, that is odd. Um, Yeah, that would give me pause. If I saw something like that, I probably wouldn't be able to identify what it is immediately. Didn't go away for about an hour. Oh, that's weird. That's very strange. Yeah. So just from your testimony, right, there are some things in the sky that people have seen that some of us we can maybe come up with some plausible naturalistic explanations for some of them. But for others, who knows, right? And I think this is quite common, right? I've seen a lot of interesting things in the sky. I've never thought that maybe what I was looking at was a UFO, but I have seen the ISS. I've seen Starlink satellites. I've seen other natural phenomena, which I'll outline in a moment, uh, which were um, very interesting, um, but which were nonetheless identifiable. But I've never seen anything that made me think, oh, I don't know what that is. Maybe it's aliens. That's not to say that I wouldn't like to see such a thing, right? I think I would very much like to see um, a UFO. I think that would be cool, right? Or UAPs as they're called now. Why do I have these pictures here? Well, we see a lot of, as I was saying, natural and artificial phenomena, both in the sky, which, if you didn't know any better, you could reasonably surmise is some kind of alien craft, perhaps, right? This right here, a replica of Sputnik 1. Who's who can tell me about Sputnik other than what I've placed here on the slides? Any aficionados of the history of the space race between the Soviet Union and the United States? Good. Yeah, that's a good guess. It's not the first manned space flight, but it is the first artificial satellite. So there was nobody in here, but it was the first time anybody successfully launched an artificial satellite into orbit. So this was a communications satellite. Yeah, the US responded with ARPA. Um I think if I'm not mistaken, is ARPA what was eventually developed into DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency? I'm not exactly sure if those acronyms are coincidentally similar or not, but yeah, it was 1957 and ARPANET and DARPANET, yeah. Early antecedents of the internet. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, so Sputnik is fascinating. The space race was interesting. So a little bit about the space race, just sort of off the top of my head. We like to think the Americans won it, and arguably the Americans did win the space race. The idea was who was going to be the first superpower to put someone on the moon, right? The Americans did do that first. Everything else, the Soviets beat them to, right? First communication satellite, first flights with animals. So the Soviets would send dogs up there, which is heartbreaking because they just left them up there. Um, oh God, it breaks my heart. Um, but nonetheless, they were successful. First manned flights. Um, Yeah, the Soviets were really beating the Americans at everything until except for when it came to getting somebody on the moon. The Americans did do that first. But Sputnik represented an early victory in the space race. And you could see Sputnik with the naked eye, right? It would look similar to how we can see the International Space Station when it passes overhead. Not as bright, but you would still see it as a point of light moving across the sky in a straight line. It moves faster because it's in orbit around the Earth. It would move faster in the sky from your perspective than any airplane would. And it also wouldn't have any blinking lights like an airplane. And no sound, obviously, either, because it's not in the atmosphere. Um, so if you had seen something like this, and maybe I don't know, you live under a rock or something in the late 1950s, you might have mistaken this for a UFO, right? For some kind of alien craft, when in actuality, it was put there by people. Another interesting example is this, the SR-71 Blackbird. I seem to always I'm not even that big of an X-Men fan, but I seem to always come back to reference X-Men in this course. This is, of course, if you're familiar with the X-Men, you know that Charles Xavier flies the X-Men around in an SR-71 Blackbird like this one. This was developed as a spy plane, um, and its maiden flights. This is sort of a training version of the aircraft. I got both of these images from Wikipedia, by the way. This is a training version. But its maiden flights were actually made out of Area 51 in Nevada, which is also associated with, um, certain conspiracy theories around extraterrestrial life. But this airplane is quite cool. This can fly very high in the atmosphere and it can fly above Mach 3, so 3 times the speed of sound. Imagine you saw something like this flying around being tested. You might think, oh, that must be an alien craft. No aircraft can fly like that. And of course, these are, when these are under development and even when they're deployed for use, it's not like the CIA or the military tells people about them, right? Because this information is all highly classified. The plane, the specs, what it's for, what it's doing, all very classified, right? So, they're not telling people that this thing is going to be flying around in the neighborhood. And if you saw something like that flying at high altitude, going much, much faster than any like passenger jet that you see flying around, you might think, oh, that's kind of weird. I wonder what that is, right? An Area 51 associated with all of this crazy stuff, right? I remember what they, what they, the first time I learned about Area 51 was actually when I was a young fella, and I was watching that movie Independence Day. And they do that funny thing in that movie, sort of funny thing where Roswell, the Roswell incident in 47, it was supposed the story, the urban legend, I guess I'll call it an urban legend, is that there was a crashed alien spacecraft, and the government came and collected up the wreckage and the bodies. It was probably a weather balloon. It probably really was a weather balloon that had gone down, um, or a spy balloon, some sort of balloon. Um, but this sort of like folklore grew around it, such that certain people believed that there really was a crashed alien craft um, that landed in Roswell or crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in the 40s. Uh, Independence Day, I don't know if this is if this was if this was already a conspiracy theory. It could have very well been, or if it was something the writers of the film did, whether Roland Emmerich came up with the idea or whatever for Independence Day to have the alien bodies being stored at Area 51, and of course everyone has to go to Area 51. It's kind of like the last bastion of humanity um, in this fight with the aliens. I mean. Independence Day is a guilty pleasure for me. It is a very silly movie, and I love it. I absolutely love it. Will Smith, Welcome to Earth, punching an alien in the face. Amazing. Love that movie. What else might you see when looking up? Oh, well, some of you have mentioned Starlink satellites, right? This is a photograph of a train of Starlink satellites. Now, I guess I should disclose my personal bias against Elon Musk. Um, I'm not a fan. Okay, I let's just get that out of the way. I am not a fan of Musk. I think he's erratic, um, dangerous. He has too much wealth and too much power. Yeah, I think we all. Yeah, I think yeah, Fern. Yeah, we're all kind of like, really, really, Elon. Like, what a 180 he did. Although, according to his daughter Vivian, he was always kind of a jerk. So you can hate him for his kind of performative well, I'm gonna call it performative wokeness before, when he was when he would claim to be down with like marriage equality and gay people and stuff. What a flip he did. Now I don't know. I don't and the problem is, like, I don't know what he actually believes. I don't know if he actually is left wing or right wing. I think he's just doing whatever he thinks benefits him and his perception. But I don't like him. Yeah, he wants to be popular. Yeah, I don't like the guy. Yeah, he's money. Yeah, Quan, exactly. Like whatever's going to benefit his financial situation. Which does he really need to benefit? Come on, the guy's got enough money. The guy's got more money than anybody. Like, I just wish he would stop. I wish he would go away. If I had that much money, I would be like Tom from MySpace. I don't know if you guys remember MySpace, but Tom from MySpace, what a hero. Got rich, sold MySpace, just disappeared and lived his life with his money. I think that's what I would do. You know, I'd go, I think I would spend a lot of time fishing if I was a billionaire, not trying to get more billions. Anyway, sorry, enough of my rant. But yeah, maybe you're right. Elon doesn't know what he actually believes. Kaya says multiple people who know him say he hardly actually works and just spends all day gaming and on Twitter. Yes, I've heard that as well. And just looking at how often he tweets, it's like, come on, you're obviously not working. Um, And there's the drug use too. I don't know if you all if you all read the piece that came out in the New York Times recently, but it was reported by the New York Times that according to some of the sources that they had for this story, that he was doing so much ketamine that it was affecting his bladder, which is a serious side effect of ketamine abuse. And he's also using magic mushrooms and ecstasy and other things, right? Um, yeah, Kalis didn't surprise me either. Yeah, shack in the woods. I'm build a billionaire shack in the woods. Obviously, it would be a nice shack. It would have solar panels and running water and stuff. But, I wouldn't become a supervillain like Musk. At least I say that. Money corrupts. It certainly seems to, right? Holly says, I randomly look up in the sky one night and saw the Starlink train. Yeah. I saw it too. I was fortunate enough to see that myself. Oh, neat. And you saw one of his rockets launch. Yeah, you know what? And I really am torn. I never really was like a Musk stan, you know, but I do think space exploration is important. And I do think the technical achievements of SpaceX are amazing. I mean, it's true. What they've managed to do. I mean, really what SpaceX has managed to do is make, economic um, rockets using off-the-shelf parts. What I don't like is that the government subsidizes this stuff so much. The American government subsidizes this so much, not at the expense of NASA, but NASA's always kind of struggled for funding when things like the American military receive all kinds of funding. Uh, and maybe I'll get accused of being a socialist or something, even though I guess I somewhat am. Oh, we want the government doing all the space research. Well, yeah, kind of. Yeah, I mean, because look, you have Musk. There's Bezos, who's just sends Katy Perry up into the upper atmosphere. Who is that for? Um, these are very much vanity. Bezos strikes me as very much a vanity project. SpaceX, I think, is a little more interesting and important, but it's not Musk who's making the rockets, right? So, yeah, Leo, I heard about the IVF thing as well. Yeah, exactly. So Vivian, if you live under a rock or you're not online like I am, his daughter Vivian came out as trans and Musk basically disowned her, which I don't have kids, but I could never imagine, if my kid came out to me and said, I'm this or that, I can't imagine disowning them. What a callous, hateful thing to do. Um, yeah, abusing every psychedelic. Yeah, yeah, that's true, Fern. So I said earlier, if I had billions, I wouldn't turn into a supervillain. But like Fern says, you do kind of have to be a supervillain to make billions of dollars. And Musk probably isn't even the worst one, right? I mean, Peter Thiel, is is another one. Yeah. Well, that's the thing, Martha. I don't think I can imagine that amount of money. Oh, Holly, if you have pictures of the space flight, if you want, share them on the Discord server if you want to. I think that would be pretty cool. Yes. Yeah, that you're right, Bell, about that. His lying about his credentials. Yeah, kind of shilling, as Tristan says. Yeah, goes around and makes things worse. I've heard also that some of his employees have to like give him dummy tasks to make him feel important, but also distract him while they get the real work done. I think that's hilarious, actually. Yeah. Yeah, Zach, that's right. He just owns it. Yeah, I don't think he's started any companies himself, or the ones he has like Neuralink, I think he founded himself, but he doesn't do any of the work. Yeah, same with Tesla, like Kaya says. Yep. Oh, that's an interesting article. Thank you for sharing that, Fern. We'll have a look at that. Yeah, and the Emerald Mine, right? Yep. Yeah, surrounded by yes men. Oh, SpaceX. Yeah. The okay, Carolyn. Yeah, Fern. Fern explained it pretty well. SpaceX is a private space contracting company, so they make rockets um that can take people and supplies up to the International Space Station. They're working on like reusable rockets, so rockets that can take off and come back and not just like land in the ocean, but they can actually do like a vertical landing, which is very cool. But Musk is not the man behind it. He's the check behind this, but he's not the engineer behind this. They also make the Starlink satellites, which are pictured here. So anyway, okay, so we all dislike Elon. I think it's just I don't know. I see a parallel with Elon and somebody like Kanye West, right? Somebody who's very charismatic and entertaining, but also quite troubled. And I think we're kind of seeing a deterioration um, in Musk that, in some ways, I think mirrors what we've seen from Kanye, if that makes sense. Does Kanye? That's a good question. Does Kanye believe in aliens? I wouldn't put it past him, but I don't know. Actually, I don't know. He certainly believes in a lot of interesting, strange things. But yeah, Starlink train. I remember I saw Starlink train. I thought it was pretty cool. This was prior to, all the recent stuff like the Nazi salute. But I saw Starlink train. It was during the fireworks competition in Ottawa a couple of summers ago, which is really cool. You should really check this out. But every August, there's a fireworks competition, and competitors from all around the world launch fireworks from over in Gatineau, right around where the Museum of History is. And you can go to Majors Hill Park, or you can go over across the bridge to Quebec, and you get a really good show twice a week. And so I was down there with some friends and my partner, and they were watching the show. I was taking some pictures. And then as soon as the show wrapped up, I could see a train of Starlink satellites that were being launched because the rocket goes up, its doors open, and it launches a whole bunch, and they all kind of spread out in a big long line. And it was cool. I'm not going to lie. It was cool to see it happen. I was like, wow, that's neat. A lot of people were looking like, "What is that?" I knew. I was like, "Oh yeah, those are Starlink satellites." But if you didn't know, you might think, "Oh, a UFO," right? Yeah, that's right. We should clarify actually when we're talking about aliens. I think when ufologists or the ancient astronaut people talk about aliens, I think they have something very specific in mind, right? Yeah, like Bell says, like maybe the grays, right? The little gray aliens. Sagan describes the little gray aliens in our reading, right? They're 4 or 5 feet tall, big heads, big eyes, naked, um, intelligent, much more technically advanced than we are, right? Um, we seem to have or they seem to have a specific idea of humanoid intelligent life. I think when we find extraterrestrial life, like Fern says, it's probably going to be microbes, right? Maybe on um, maybe on one of the moons of Jupiter or Saturn, right? Yeah, maybe there are humanoids too, like Vulcans from Star Trek. I always thought it was cool that in the Star Trek universe, the canonically the first alien life forms that humanity made contact with were the Vulcans, the live long and prosper guys, the logic and everything, right? I always thought that was kind of cool. um Yeah, Leo, if there are aliens, maybe it would be very unlikely that they would be humanoid. I agree. And this is a criticism Sagan actually elsewhere in I think the Demon Haunted World. That's actually a criticism he offers of Star Trek is that all of the aliens are too human. And I thought, okay, that's fair, but also um you know, we're de it's not like they had an unlimited budget, especially in the original series, right? I mean, that's why Star Trek has the transporter. They couldn't afford to film people going up and down from the Enterprise to whatever planet in a little shuttle for every episode. So, well, why don't we just um beam them down with technology, right? We'll save money that way, right? So you're in Star Trek, most of the aliens are humanoid. Star Wars, a lot more non-humanoid aliens. Um, thanks to, like Jim Henson's Creature Shop and a bigger budget. So, you get Yoda, you get Jabba the Hutt. Um, but 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 um But one of the interesting criticisms Sagan had of Star Wars, you can see this with one of his interviews on the Tonight Show, is that um, of the humans that there are, they're not very diverse, which I think was spot on. Um, it's better now, but previously you had what James Earl Jones voicing Darth Vader, and you had Lando Calrissian, I think, were like the only people of color in Star Wars, like in the original trilogy. Now it's a lot more diverse, but that was an interesting criticism of Star Wars that Sagan offered that I thought was cool. Um, oh, Zach, interesting. Yeah, live to see Contact Day just to celebrate the Star Trek days. Yeah, I agree. April 5th, 2063, in the Star Trek universe is when humanity makes contact with alien life. Um, I'm a bit of a Star Trek savant, so yeah, sorry. And you're right, Holly, there was that episode. That episode was called The Chase. And yeah, that was how they explained it. It was well, ancient aliens, humanoid aliens that seeded lots of planets and that's why, the humans, the Vulcans, and the Romulans, and the Cardassians, and the Klingons, and all of those creatures from Star Trek, that's why they all are humanoid. But there are non-humanoid species in Star Trek too. Um, yeah, Will, Arrival, such a cool movie, and that is what I would expect. I mean, I'm not saying like if there are aliens, they would really look that way, but they would be truly alien in the way that the heptapods were in Arrival. Man, if there's one guy who's doing the Lord's work in terms of science fiction filmmaking nowadays, it is Denis Villeneuve for sure. That guy is crushing it. Like Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, Dune, obviously, he is crushing it. The way they did that whole Sapir-Whorf hypothesis thing with the perception of time, I was like, oh man, that is so cool. That's such a neat way to use that in a story. Um, yeah, Bell, that's a good counterpoint. Maybe if, the laws of physics are similar everywhere, maybe we would find humanoid life forms elsewhere. Then again, as you say in your follow-up, maybe it depends on the environment, right? Maybe they have a different atmosphere, or maybe they're of a different chemical composition than we are, right? Yeah, Leo, good point. Even those aliens from Star Wars are a little human. Yoda more so, but I'll give you that one. So yeah, I've included this one as well because this image is a still from some gun camera footage from an FA-18 Super Hornet that was captured in 2015. And there's actually a video. You can find this video online. This is a UAP captured by an American military aircraft. Um, the video is pretty remarkable because you can hear the pilots kind of freaking out about it. And you think to yourself, at least, and I admit I'm guilty of this, right? When news broke of this and was shortly followed up by the preliminary report on UAPs that was declassified actually under Trump's first term. I, you know, you can probably guess what I think about Trump based on what I think about Elon. But one interesting thing that Trump did do was get this report on UAP activity declassified, which is kind of neat. Um, so I'm guilty of this, where I thought, oh, this isn't just some grainy cell phone footage. This is like radar, infrared, gun camera stuff. This is the American military. This is like super advanced. So if they've caught something on using these sensors, well, there must be something there. But actually, no, not really, because these sorts of sensors are not calibrated or designed for detecting anomalous aerial phenomena or UAPs. These could actually be artifacts created by the sensors, like like for example, certain photographs of ghosts or other paranormal activity are actually artifacts that the camera captures. It could be lens flare, it could be light reflecting off dust motes. You know, that's how we get orbs, could be overexposure. There are similar artifacts that occur with infrared sensors, with radar. Um, and this could be that. And one of the things, NASA actually did a big press conference a couple of years ago on UAPs where they said this is a problem we have, is that military aircraft detect a lot of UAPs, but these sensors are not designed for detecting UAPs. They're designed for detecting, other aircraft, other terrestrial aircraft. So a lot of these could be artifacts, and we need to develop, number one, sensors specifically for finding UAPs, and we need to develop better techniques for analyzing that footage. Um, and this will probably involve AI, machine learning, stuff like that. See, Kaya. Good arm, because I think this was over the ocean. But it's weird. Like, watch the video. Um, yeah. Okay. Maybe you could share that video essay in the Discord server, Zach. Yeah. Okay. But watch this video, right? If you haven't seen it. And even Obama, President Obama, former President Obama, in interviews has said, like, yes, there's stuff in the sky where we've got pictures or videos of it, and we don't know what it is, right? That doesn't mean it's aliens necessarily. Um, Maybe that's why Trump wanted this all declassified to sort of one up Obama, right? You know, because Obama knows about aliens, but we have better aliens, tremendous aliens, way better than Obama's, way better than Biden's. Ah, yeah, that's another reason, Bell. Maybe it was a bit of a distraction. Oh, Hank Green did a little thing, a little analysis of this. That's cool. Yeah, maybe the heat signature of a plane as a consequence of the IR camera. Yeah, could be. Um, the point I want to make is just that just because a UAP is detected by sensor devices on that are used in the most advanced military in the world, that does not mean we've identified an alien spacecraft, because that's not what these tools are for. It's very much like the problem that the ghost hunters have that we discussed last week, right? I can go into a house and I can use a microphone to record EVPs, or I can use an EMF meter to look for electromagnetic signatures. I can use an infrared camera, whatever. But that's not what those tools are for. Same problem here, right? But maybe some of us have seen something interesting in the sky, and that's quite cool. Um, and they're both aliens, UFOs, UAPs, all very popular topic. Ancient people certainly saw um, mysterious things in the sky. Um, but of course, nowadays a lot of UAPs are going to be artificial phenomena. That could include, some kind of apparatus, perhaps a drone from another country, like the Chinese spy balloon that was shot down a little while that not this year. I think 2 years ago there was a spy balloon that had drifted over like Alaska or northern Canada or something, and they scrambled some jets to shoot it down. Um, you know, an artificial phenomena include things like that, or maybe like drones from another country, or experimental aircraft from another country, but also artifacts like sensor artifacts. That's nowadays. Back in the day, a lot of the things that people saw that we today might identify as a UFO, were probably natural phenomena. That's not to rule out the possibility of some kind of alien visitation. I mean, who knows? It's a big universe, but we don't have any solid proof that we were ever visited by extraterrestrial life forms in the past. Indeed, even nowadays, right, there are a lot more artificial things in the sky, but there are still natural phenomena that people mistake for UFOs. A lot of UFOs turn out to be one of these two things. Clouds, even, right? I've put clouds as the first thing in the list. And you could Google this right now if you want to, but perhaps you've already seen one in real life or seen an image of one. There's a particular type of cloud called a lenticular cloud. Has anyone seen one of these? Anyone know what I'm talking about here? Lenticular cloud. If you want, you could just Google right now. Take a look, and you'll be surprised. What shape are these lenticular clouds? Somebody want to tell me in the chat? They are very cool. Yes. But what do they look like? Right? What I mean, I come on, you know what they look like. They look like flying saucers. But of course, they're just clouds. They're natural phenomena. That's one of the things I thought was really neat about that movie Nope. Um, the alien, what you think is a spacecraft. Okay, spoiler alert. If you haven't seen Nope, you think it's a spacecraft. It's actually life form, and it's always kind of hiding in the clouds around the mountains. Um, that was cool. I wonder if maybe they were riffing on this notion of lenticular clouds resembling UFOs. What a great movie. I like that movie. I think that was my favorite of the of it's Jordan Peele. Yeah, my favorite of his films. I like all the other ones. What are the other ones? Get Out and Us. They're great, but Nope was my favorite. Balloons. Chinese spy balloons, weather balloons, surveillance balloons. From up high, they might reflect light a certain way and appear very strange. Um, Nowadays, drones are quite ubiquitous, right? You can buy a drone off of Amazon and go fly it yourself, right? But when this technology was new, if you were to look up and see a drone from far away, you might not know what you're looking at. Meteors. Oh, that's right. Who's seen a meteor, like a good one, a good meteor? What is a meteor, firstly, and who has seen one? I've seen some impressive ones. I've never got a good picture of one. Yeah, falling space debris. That's right. A meteor might be made by some, like a derelict satellite falling into the atmosphere. One of those SpaceX disasters, when the rockets blow up and re-enter the atmosphere, those look like meteors, or just pieces of rock, you know. Um, we see them in the sky. We call them shooting stars colloquially. And sometimes, they're just quick, like zoop, just a little zip. But sometimes they can burn very bright for quite a long time. I've seen a couple like that burned probably 2 or 3 seconds in the sky, and were quite impressive. And if you didn't know what they were, you might be a little bit freaked out, right? Martha saw one like that too, large and green. Oh, you were in Perce, Quebec? Yeah, away from that's where you got to go. You got to go away from the light pollution. And yeah, the Perseid meteor shower. That's the one in August, right? Uh, we have a couple. Yeah, late July, early August. We get a couple meteor showers every year on this planet, which is cool. The Perseid meteor shower appears to come from the direction of the constellation. I believe it's Perseid. Again, think of last time, constellations as areas of the sky. The Perseid meteor shower comes out of that area of the sky, and it happens because the Earth, every year as it orbits the sun, passes through the debris trail of a comet. So a comet came. Comets have a long orbital period, right? So they go in highly eccentric orbits and they go close to the sun, and sometimes you can see them in the sky. Last year there was a comet visible from Earth for a few weeks. And the comets are made of ices, could be water ice, but probably other substances too, like methane. And when they get close to the sun, they start evaporating, basically. And so they have a big long tail and they kind of hang out in the sky for weeks or months. You can see them. So a comet like this went around the Earth and left a bunch of dust and rocks and ices and stuff. And every year the Earth passes through it, and that's why we have the Perseid meteor shower. But we have other meteor showers too, like the Leonid meteor shower, which comes out of the constellation Leo. So, whenever there's a meteor shower, it's a good idea to look up, even if you're in the city and there is light pollution. If you have a tripod and a camera, you can do this with your cell phone. You can take a long exposure photograph of the night sky. So basically, maybe you want to leave your shutter open for a minute, and you'll hopefully catch some shooting stars. And if you have a remote control, which I do. I'm fortunate enough, although you can pick these up at any electronics store. Just a little tiny tripod with a little Bluetooth remote control. You can put your phone on there, point it at the sky, keep the shutter open for 1 or 2 minutes, and just keep taking pictures like that for an hour. Um, and then by the time you're done, you'll probably have photographed some meteors, even if you couldn't see them with the naked eye. So that's fun. Oh, the Geminids, yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, no light pollution. That's the key, right? I I like living in the city, but I grew up in the middle of nowhere, out in rural northern Ontario. And I love the convenience of the city. I like that I can just walk to a grocery store instead of driving an hour. I like that I can go see a movie whenever I want. I like that everything is conveniently close at hand. Oh, but I miss the night sky so much. You can still see the night sky decently from Ottawa. Even in Toronto, you can see a lot of the brighter objects. You can see Venus and certain constellations, but you haven't seen the night sky unless you've seen it in the countryside on a moonless night. Oh, it's amazing. And I used to watch You go outside, make sure there's no light, let your eyes adjust. You can see the Milky Way, you can see shooting stars. If you're lucky, you can see the Northern Lights. Um, People I think are under the mistaken impression that you have to go way up north to see them. You actually don't. Sometimes we are lucky enough to see them here. I mean, last um last summer and through the winter, I got some amazing shots of the Northern Lights from here in town, right? And you could see them with the naked eye in spite of the light pollution. But there's nothing like a night sky free of night pollution. It's amazing. What else? I've gone and changed the slides. Yeah, obviously we've mentioned the ISS, even maybe certain forms of lightning, like I don't know if ball lightning is real, but if it is, maybe certain sightings of ball lightning might be mistaken for alien spacecraft. There are also jets and sprites. Who knows about jets and sprites? So jets, as in, same word as like a jet plane, and sprites, like Sprite, the soft drink. And there are other weird ones like elves. These are phenomena associated with lightning, but they happen very high above the thundercloud. So thunderclouds are generally produced in cumulonimbus clouds, which are very, very big, and they have that sort of anvil shape. Sometimes they rotate. If they rotate, it's called a supercell. But they start down in the lower atmosphere and go way, way, way up into the stratosphere, and they kind of look like a blacksmith's anvil. Now, from the Earth, we can see the lightning hitting the ground, right? We can see lightning strikes beneath the cloud or even off to the side of the cloud. That's called a bolt from the blue. A storm might be many kilometers away, but a lightning bolt can arc off of the storm cloud and travel many, many kilometers and land where the sky is blue and you don't expect a lightning strike. I think this happened actually once when I was in the fourth grade. In the fourth grade, I was still living in Southern Ontario, where we would get. It's kind of like a mini tornado alley down there, like from like north of Toronto, Barrie, Aurelia, Guelph, that area, kind of like between Toronto metropolitan area and where you start getting into northern Ontario around North Bay Sudbury. Kind of in that area is almost like a little tiny tornado alley. So we would get severe thunderstorms quite often. Um, but this was a sunny day, not a cloud in the sky. And we were in class, which was in one of those, we used to call them portables, basically a portable building, like a little tiny classroom all in its own building that was kind of off somewhere else. That's where the grade four classroom was. Um, Bright sunny day. We were all just working away on whatever we were working on, and we heard boom, a big loud crack of thunder, but there was not a cloud in the sky. And I always wondered what that was. But then I learned when I got older that, yeah, sometimes a lightning strike can occur far away from the storm itself. It doesn't just go straight down to the ground, but rather goes off to the side and strikes somewhere where you might not even be able to see the storm. So I think that was a bolt from the blue. But Jets and Sprites, yeah, like Bell says, you think Jets and Sprites are aliens. They're crazy. They look really cool. And you look these up after the lecture, but they come off the top of the clouds. And so if the storm is very far away and you're at a high point on the Earth, you might be able to see these Jets and Sprites coming off the top of a storm cloud. And that might freak you out a bit. Or, stars like Sirius. Sirius twinkles a lot. It's very often mistakenly reported as a UFO. Or the planet Venus. It's the brightest object in the night sky after the moon. Um, Twinkles a lot depending on atmospheric conditions. You might mistake it for a UFO, right? And only a small percentage of UFO sightings actually remain unsolved. Some of them are very compelling. Um, but are they aliens? I think it's good to remain curious yet skeptical, right? Remember, always remember, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And I would love it if there were aliens visiting. I think that would be really neat. It's like I want to believe, right? But can I believe? Do I have the epistemic warrant? No, I don't, right? And as mentioned, we've modified this terminology, unidentified, anomalous, or sometimes aerial phenomena. I want to talk a little bit about the ancient astronaut hypothesis before we discuss other aspects of subject matter for today. There were UFO sightings in the deep past, and there are in the present, although most of them tend to take place in America and Europe. Um, Maybe that's just because where most people have cameras. I don't know. Although, to my knowledge, we don't see as many UFO reports in places like China and India, which have high populations and are also modernizing very quickly. Like nowadays in China, as everybody's got a really good smartphone. So, um, I wonder if there's been a spike in UAP reports that coincides with the proliferation of smartphones in those countries. But in any case, some people, to explain UFO sightings and also to explain certain aspects of mythology or ancient architecture, appeal to this ancient astronaut hypothesis, which was popularized in the 1960s and 70s by Eric von Daniken, and remains popular thanks to Ancient Aliens and even shows like Unsolved Mysteries. Unsolved Mysteries is a bit of a weird show for me because, you'll have the whole season on like unsolved murders or disappearances, and then they'll throw in one about some guy was abducted by aliens or something. Like, uh, but Ancient Aliens is arguably the worst offender. And I don't want to specifically address the claims made on that show because, quite frankly, they are absurd. Um, but maybe we should talk about the overall claim that von Daniken and others like him make, which is that aliens visited Earth in our ancient past and influenced human society in some way. So, what are some of the things he draws on? Well, I've got to change this picture because it's a little pixelated. Here he is looking at some ancient Egyptian stuff, LARPing as an archaeologist, I suppose. But he's the author of Chariots of the Gods, question mark, which asks whether we can explain the accomplishments of ancient peoples, obvious ones like the Nazca Lines, ancient Egypt and Easter Island, and maybe lesser known ones like the Baghdad Battery, which was, and this is true, probably not a battery, um, by uh, by hypothesizing that our ancestors were visited by ancient astronauts and they were mistaken for gods, and that these ancient astronauts influenced our belief systems or perhaps actively intervened, sharing technology that enabled us to build the pyramids or something, right? I should, we want to watch out for the ad hominem fallacy, right? Yet it is important to point out that von Daniken is a convicted fraudster. He was convicted of fraud and spent time in prison, which is where he wrote his second book. So that, I think, according to a lot of skeptics, ought to be disqualifying, right? I'm not saying his ideas are wrong because he's a fraudster in an ad hominem sense. I'm saying, like, look, he lied and got caught and served prison time for it. So we know this is the sort of person who's not adverse to lying. Um, and that's important, right? And also this, like this whole thing, chariots of the gods? Question mark? Why? Why the question mark? Well, it allows him to maintain some kind of plausible deniability in case he is accused of being a charlatan. Like, you're lying, you're making all this stuff up, Eric von Daniken. Well, no, I'm not. I'm just asking questions. I'm not saying there were definitely chariots of the gods. I'm asking what if they're chariots of the gods? It's a sort of plausible deniability tactic. You see this a lot in what I like to call like online sophistry. There are those trolls that get into like bad faith debates with you, and the cover is always that they are just asking questions, when really I think a lot of these folks have an agenda. Think of somebody like Steven Crowder, right? That right-wing troll guy who dresses like Nathan Drake for his podcasts or whatever, right? And he used to have that thing where he'd go, I don't know what it was called. Um, Tell me I'm wrong, prove I'm wrong, or show I'm wrong, or I don't know what it was called, but he like goes to like college campuses and gets into debates with undergrads. Oh, change my mind. That's what it was called. And he'll go to college campuses and be like, you know, uh, everyone should have guns. Change my mind. Or socialism is evil. Change my mind. There are two genders. Change my mind. Right. And his cover is I'm just asking questions, when really he has like a kind of hard right agenda that he's trying to promote. Um, this is the same kind of rhetorical move here, right? Von Daniken is trying to maintain this sort of plausible deniability. He's like, I'm not trying to convince anybody that it's all aliens. Not at all. I'm just asking questions. But he is trying to market his books to this sort of captive audience of UFO enthusiasts and ancient astronaut enthusiasts, right? And I think that's kind of a little slimy. Um, but yeah, the Baghdad Battery, Easter Island, ancient Egypt, the Nazca lines, all all examples of uh examples drawn from von Daniken's work, where he argues that ancient astronauts either influenced or helped, actively assisted ancient peoples. Um, and this is inspired by the cargo cults, which were a real phenomenon. Let's talk about the cargo cults for a minute, actually. Who's first of all, who has heard of this notion of the cargo cults, or phenomenon rather? Who would like to tell me about them or tell the class about them? Surely someone has heard of the cargo cults. Holly says nope. Zach's maybe heard of them. So the cargo cults, uh, I think this was in the aftermath of the Second World War. Um, Yeah, the things, yeah, exactly, Zach, that's right. The things of airplanes arriving on islands with indigenous people who didn't understand what airplanes were. Yeah, there were these airplanes, like Westerners. I'm a little sketchy on the details, but I do believe it was in the aftermath of the Second World War. When there was a sort of military presence in the area, and there were these indigenous people that lived there, and they didn't quite understand what these airplanes were, but they knew that these airplanes would fly over and land on airfields and sometimes drop supplies for them. And the indigenous people, they didn't have any idea about airplanes, and they maybe what they did is mistook them for gods. And so they built like these airplanes, not working airplanes, obviously, but these representations of airplanes and landing strips to try to get them to come back, right? And the idea is that, well, maybe ancient people did something like that with aliens, right? Yeah, it's a very curious thing. Um, and like, yeah, maybe, look, we can explore that idea in good faith. Like, sure, maybe there were ancient aliens and they visited Earth and somehow influenced or perhaps actively intervene. But again, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. When we are looking into this, if we're doing it in good faith, if we're being intellectually honest, is what I mean by that. We have to keep in mind the difference between scientific accounts and pseudoscientific accounts, right? Yeah. Oh, maybe that's related to Holly. Yeah, the some culture that worshipped a prophet, but he was actually a pilot. Yeah. That's probably related. Again, I'm a little sketchy on my history of the cargo cults, but um what an interesting phenomenon. Like what an interesting thing to have happened. It kind of reminds me of Return of the Jedi when the Ewoks think that C3PO is a god. And C3PO has to be very, he C3PO does a good job of not being unethical, I think, in that situation. But um anyway, we've got to keep in mind the difference between science and pseudoscience. And again, this has something to do with the demarcation problem, right? How do we delineate between science and pseudoscience? And there are a lot of ways we can answer that, but in short, pseudoscience generally seems scientific when it is not. I think Ancient Aliens is particularly grievous about this, right? They'll have people on claiming to be experts, which are not experts. Pseudoscience will often offer non-parsimonious explanations. So remember, the principle of parsimony or Occam's razor is on one formulation, the idea that you ought not to multiply entities beyond necessity. In another formulation, it's the idea that the simplest answer is probably the most correct one. Often, pseudoscientific theories violate the principle of parsimony. They also offer hypotheses that we just can't falsify. A big one, I think, with ufology and ancient astronaut theory is that they use evidence selectively. So they engage in a fallacy called cherry picking. Um, they might look at evidence. You see this with the Baghdad battery, which I'll talk about in a moment. But they point to this device that superficially resembles, well, this a battery. It has an electrolyte in it, and it has a positive and negative terminal. And if you put it into a device, it creates an electrical circuit, and electrons move and power your device, right? And they'll claim, well, the Baghdad battery looks like that, so it was a battery, despite evidence to the contrary. Like for example, the lack of electronic devices in that time and place, right? Uh, oh, the Pastafarians. Oh, those are the flying spaghetti monster people, aren't they? Right? Remember, that was a thing during the new atheism, right? Remember, like when Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and all those guys were selling all their books and making everybody afraid of Muslims and stuff. Um, I mean, sorry, but like, yeah, well, the first philosophy essay I ever wrote was on the God delusion by Dawkins. And when I look back, I just cringe so hard about the new atheism. I mean, I am an atheist, but some of the most annoying people for me can be other atheists. Like the Reddit atheists, like debate me, bro. Like, oh, do you believe in a flying spaghetti monster too? Like, come on. I think the only one of those new atheists that I still have respect for is Daniel Dennett, who passed away last year, unfortunately. Legend. We should pour. I can't pour this out, but I pour one out for Daniel Dennett right now. So, but yeah, I was so cringe. It was so cringe and stuff, and it is what got me into philosophy. But I look back and I just, oh God, it was so cringy. That was my cringe era. But yeah, the flying spaghetti monster is one of those reductio ad absurdum arguments, right? Like, oh, You believe in God. Well, why don't you just believe in this flying spaghetti monster? It's very silly. Um, I think a lot of pseudoscientific theories use jargon, right? That sounds scientific, kind of like I said in this point, but they don't use they don't use technical terminology properly. There, you'll see other logical fallacies in their arguments. And this, by the way, is not limited to the natural sciences. So, a natural science like astronomy, as we learned last time, has a sort of accompanying pseudo-scientific counterpart that is astrology. But it's not limited to that stuff, right? There's pseudo-history, there's pseudo-archaeology, and arguably this ancient astronaut stuff fits well within the that sort of category of pseudo history or pseudo archaeology. Let's talk about why before we take a break. Well, just looking at the claims that I outlined on the slide a few slides ago, the Baghdad Battery. This is a drawing of the Baghdad Battery. I got this from the Encyclopedia Britannica. You've got a clay pot that would be filled with an electrolyte solution. So, um, maybe like vinegar, something, an electrolyte, something where there are ions, negative ions, molecule or atoms that have an extra electron, and they want to lose that extra electron. Um, so you put in this copper thing with an iron. Let's get this out of the way here. You got a copper tube with this iron rod, and that goes in, and something happens where if we connect wires up to it, we can actually detect an electric current. Oh my goodness, what's going on with this thing? Uh, I guess I'm down at the bottom of the screen now. Although whatever. There we go. Trying to get myself out of the way. I know you guys don't see the screen the same way I do, but sometimes my little chat thingy blocks my view of the slides. So it's claimed by some that this was a battery because there's an electrolyte solution, and yeah, if you put the apparatus together, you can detect a very weak electric current. Just it's kind of like a potato battery, right? Or a lemon battery. You ever make one of those? Yes, Bell. We are getting to that, but you're absolutely right. There's a sort of implicit racism in von Daniken's ideas. Von Daniken, as I mentioned, he's from Switzerland, so European guy, and he's not like overtly racist, right? He's not calling people slurs, but there's sort of like an implicit racism in the idea that the ancient Egyptians, for example, needed help from aliens to build the pyramids, but the ancient Romans didn't need help to build the Colosseum, right? Just for example. But let's come back to that. You're right for pointing that out. We will come back to that. So, what was this used for? Well, almost certainly not a battery. Why? Well, we don't find any things that run on electricity in the same sites in basically the ancient Middle East. We don't find like Baghdad and Iraq. Modern day Iraq is kind of like where ancient like Sumeria was. And in all those archaeological explorations we've made, we have not found any devices that use electricity. So this probably wasn't used as a battery. What it might have been used for was maybe electroplating jewelry. So you can plate non-precious metals with precious metals using this process. You can do gold plating and stuff with a similar process to this. So maybe this was used for electroplating jewelry. They still wouldn't have known why this worked, right? And that's important. Uh, Ancient peoples were not aware of things like electrons or electromagnetic fields. They weren't aware of the atomic properties of metals, right? They just knew that it worked. It worked for electroplating. So that's probably what this was used for. It might also have been used for storing wine, and maybe the copper and the iron is in there to do something. Maybe it was believed it kept the wine from going rancid. So if you've got traces of some electrolyte in there, maybe it's just because it's rancid wine, like literally vinegar, um, which is an electrolyte. So there's plenty of more parsimonious explanations for what this is. Certainly not a battery. I mean, the ancient Sumerians had no idea what a battery was, and they did not build this to be used as a battery. So probably not a result of ancient alien intervention, right? Or what about these things from Easter Island? These are called moai or busts. And they actually aren't just heads. They're actually they extend deep into the ground. So there's whole bodies under here. They're disproportionately large heads, but these busts are not all head, no body. These are found on Easter Island in the Pacific Ocean. They were built by ancient Polynesians. How did they do it? Well, we don't know exactly, but they probably used simple tools and simple machinery. Um, you can carve something like this with stone tools or copper tools. Moving them would probably require, in addition to a lot of manpower, probably would require logs and ropes. And we know that the Polynesians could do that because the Polynesians were incredibly advanced, um, especially in terms of nautical navigation. You know, last time we were talking about how you used to have to use the sky to reckon time and reckon location. The Polynesians managed to go all over the Pacific, settling, New Zealand, Easter Island, Hawaii. They might have gotten as far as South America. We just don't know for certain because we don't have physical evidence. You know, the Polynesians right now, in terms of the question of whether they reached the Americas, it's kind of like the Vikings a few decades ago, right? We've all seen that Heritage Minute, right? Remember those Heritage Minutes that used to be on the CBC, and it shows some little snippet from Canadian history, and then say it's part of our heritage, right? And there was one about Helga and Otto Ingstad, Scandinavian archaeologists who found the Viking settlement at Lanzo Meadow in Newfoundland and Labrador. Now, for a long time, that was just a myth because it was only attested in the saga of Eric the Red and the saga of the Greenlanders, or Greenlandiga saga, if I've got that right. So it was written about in old stories, but we didn't know that basically people from Iceland and Greenland got to North America like almost half a century before Columbus did. That was just a myth as far as most people were concerned until the Ingstads found the physical remains of a Viking settlement in modern day Newfoundland and Labrador. What those people would have called Vinland, right? Could the Polynesians have reached South America? Absolutely. They were no less sophisticated than the Norse seafaring peoples. I'm hesitant to call them Vikings because Viking is a profession, not a people, right? So when we say the Vikings, we're not talking about a nationality. We're talking about a career. We're talking about a profession. Um, but the Polynesian sailors were every bit as advanced, perhaps even more so in terms of their ability to navigate by the stars. It is absolutely not out of the question that they could have reached South America. We just don't have the physical evidence. So it's not out of the question that they could do something like this. without um without the assistance of aliens. Um, the Nazca lines are very cool. I put this one here because this one seems to depict a bird, although some people who subscribe to the ancient astronaut hypothesis might say that this actually resembles some kind of flying machine. But the claim seems to be that since these lines are only really visible from above, not from the ground, that they were made for the gods. And then the leap is that the gods are just aliens. So there aren't gods. They saw something up there and, like the cargo cult, thought they were gods when actually they were artificial spacecraft. Um, yeah, this is a leap, right? Yes, the cargo cult thing really happened. Does that mean that there were definitely alien spacecraft flying over the skies of Peru and the Inca people saw them and thought they were gods and made these lines? That's a leap. That's a leap. A lot of humans associate gods with the sky. A lot of human cultures. We talked last time about how Zeus, Jupiter, Tyr, um, Dea, various gods from all kinds of that were worshipped by lots of different Indo-European speaking peoples or people who spoke Indo-European languages. Um, all come from this one root that means sky father. And there was this dichotomy that we find in like Proto-Indo-European. Those people, the gods they worshipped, they had a sky father and they had an earth mother. So the gods are associated with, sort of different levels of being, if you like. Um, I don't know anything about the language that the ancient Incas spoke, but it's certainly not out of the question that they had gods associated with the sky and gods associated with the earth, and perhaps gods associated with the sea or the underworld as well. Like, I'm no archaeologist, but it is really not out of the question because it's just because we think there are gods in the sky, that does not mean alien spacecraft. Um, because we see the planets, and they move differently than the stars. The planets are all named after gods. We explored this all last time, right? Like, there doesn't have to have been ancient alien spacecraft in the skies that ancient people saw for us to have this association between the sky and gods. We still preserve this. I mean, if you ask most people who believe in heaven where heaven is, they'll say that it's up. Maybe not literally up, but metaphysically or metaphorically, it is a higher place. And the underworld or hell is below, right? Um, so our ways of sort of thinking and talking about this stuff, haven't really changed. The underworld is still under and the heavens are still above. So, did they make these for aliens? I don't think so. Did they make them for gods? Maybe. But that doesn't mean the gods were aliens that were visiting Earth. Or how about these? My favorite. The pyramids. These are the pyramids of Giza in Egypt on the Giza Plateau. Did aliens help us build them? I don't think so. And the reason I say that is, and this is maybe the biggest sin committed by Von Daniken and the Ancient Aliens crowd, is that we have a detailed archaeological understanding of how pyramid building evolved over time. Yes, it is impressive just how ancient these things are and how ancient people were able to do this. Absolutely. Ancient Egypt is ancient. Ancient Egypt was ancient to the ancient Greeks, right? That's how old this stuff is. The ancient Greeks, in the classical period, like 400 years BCE, to them, this was ancient, right? That's how old this stuff is. But did we need aliens to help? No. The Egyptians didn't just say one day, let's build this big giant pyramid right here. No, that's not how it worked. Ancient Egyptian royals used to actually be buried under these slabs. They were called mastabas, a sort of square slab. And your tomb would be under that slab, and then they would place a mastaba over top of it. And then, a little while later, this guy, he was an important fellow. He was a sort of priest and advisor to one of the pharaohs. His name was Imhotep. He thought, you know what would be really cool is if we stacked mastabas on top of one another, and they got smaller as we went up. And that's what they did. And so the ancient Egyptians had invented the step pyramid. And you can see three little step pyramids here. See? This one has a little row here, and then a smaller row, and then a smaller and smaller. It's like a step pyramid. Then the Egyptians had the idea, what if we made like really big pyramids, like super big, almost as big as this? And they tried, but they made mistakes. You can look up images of the bent pyramid, for example. The Egyptians kind of screwed it up. The angle was too steep, and they realized that if they kept building the pyramid at this angle, well, it would fall over. So they changed the angle. So, this is the Great Pyramid in the middle. Its angles are pretty consistent, but the bent pyramid has a very steep angle and then a very flat angle. It's a funny looking pyramid. And then these are the latest pyramids to have been built. I think the Great Pyramid was built by Khufu. Then these are again like big giant tombs. So we have this sort of we know very well how pyramid building progressed from just mastabas to step pyramids to larger pyramids where they kind of made mistakes to, the big pyramids, the great pyramids as we call them. And these are quite ruined today. I mean, back in the day, these would have been covered with like white limestone and they would have been smooth. They would have been such a sight to behold. Would have been truly amazing. Just awesome. Did they need aliens to do it? No. How did they do it? Well, the Egyptians had copper tools, a very simple machinery. They had ramps, they had levers. They didn't have the wheel, but they did have systems of transporting blocks. They could transport them using the Nile on boats. All over land, they could put logs down and kind of roll them across the logs. They could bury the wood in the sand and wet it and create a kind of slippery track that they could drag the logs on. Um, I think a lot of people also have a misconception that slave labor was used. If it was not entirely, this was not done entirely with slave labor. In fact, most of the workers were conscripts, and they would actually come and serve the pharaoh for a period of the year. Like maybe you're farming for during the summer months, and then during the winter, you're conscripted. You have to go up to Giza and you work on the pyramids. And there were these big work camps that we've uncovered where these people were housed, where they were fed. There are big communal sleeping areas. There are kitchens. And they were conscripted because it was like almost like a sort of tax, but also because you were expected to serve the pharaoh because the pharaoh was a god, right? The pharaoh was believed to be a god. And what better way to motivate people to build a big giant pyramid than to tell them that they're serving their god, right? Another interesting thing is that on all these ancient Egyptian monuments, we've actually found graffiti from the workers. So, if we go, we might find a chamber in one of these pyramids, and it'll say something like, I don't know. I don't know any ancient Egyptian, but it'll be like team guy doing this was here, or team uh human with a jackal's head was here, right? And they graffiti they'd kind of put it's like writing your name in wet cement kind of a thing. So we know that humans built these things, right? It's amazing that humans were able to do it. But definitely it was humans that did it. Before we break, let's talk a little bit about the point Bell raised about the racism. The idea that the ancient Incas or the ancient Egyptians needed extraterrestrial assistance to do this, but the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans didn't. Yeah, von Daniken has been accused of racism. Not, overt racism, but a kind of like maybe like an implicit bias. And it's something that Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think, has talked about on his podcast. Um, right? Like, why is it that the Egyptians, people who lived in Africa need assistance, but these white guys up in Europe didn't? Well, um, it's definitely Eurocentric, right? I mean, the ancient Greeks um definitely didn't look like me. My ancestry is, if I'm not mistaken, mostly Northern European. I'm not very Mediterranean, but the ancient Greeks looked more Mediterranean than I do. Um, Likewise, the Romans. And Rome was also quite a diverse society. There were people from Africa and the Middle East, from Northern Europe, from around the Mediterranean. Quite diverse. Everybody was really mad about, not everybody, but some people were really mad about Denzel Washington in the latest Gladiator movie. But yeah, there were people of power, and in fact, those two brothers that were co-emperor, uh, in real life, they were actually from Northern Africa. In the film, they're redheads, but they actually would have looked more like somebody from North Africa in real life. So Rome was actually quite diverse. But it is at the very least a sort of a very Eurocentric idea to say the Romans didn't need any help with the Colosseum, the Greeks didn't need any help with the Parthenon, but the Egyptians got the idea, or some assistance from aliens. Yeah, I think that's very silly. The Egyptians were also not the only peoples in Africa to build pyramids. There was the Nubian kingdom, which would have been to the south of the Upper Kingdom of ancient Egypt. They also built pyramids, but they look different. You know, um, Another interesting argument that you'll hear is that there are pyramids that we find all over the world. Right? How do you explain that? You're like, okay, maybe the ancient Egyptians didn't get aliens to help them build the pyramid, but somebody gave the idea to build pyramids to the Egyptians, to the Nubians. There are, of course, pyramids in Mesoamerica, right? Like the Aztecs, the Mayans, and so forth built really cool pyramids. There are like earthen pyramids in North America that the indigenous peoples built. In ancient China, kind of in Southeast Asia too. So in India, you get pyramid-like structures. Who's giving all these ancient peoples the idea to build these pyramids? Well, nobody really, other than those peoples themselves. You see, if you want to build something this big and all you've got to work with are stones, you kind of have to build a pyramid. If you want to build something that big and you don't have concrete, it's got to be a pyramid. Nothing else is going to stand up. Yeah, right. That's right, Bell. Yep, exactly. Holly's got it too. You want to make something that big, it's got to be a pyramid. Yeah, and that, yes, there could be survivorship bias too. I mean, look at ancient Greek ruins or ancient Persian ruins. There are a lot of columns, and these columns would have held up big stone roofs but nowadays they're ruined, right? They've all fallen apart. The pyramids have outlasted a lot of these non-pyramid like ancient designs. So yeah, that's a very good point. Survivorship bias. I suppose we should take a break. We don't have that many more slides to go. But I do want to talk a little bit about Carl Sagan and the episode of Cosmos. So let's see, it's 4:09. Why don't we come back at 4:20? Don't spark one up. It's the middle of class. I know we're going to resume at 4:20, but don't get any funny ideas, okay, guys? All right, I'll see you in about 10 minutes. Okay, we should continue. Got about an hour left. Um, Been good discussion so far. Thanks everybody for that. I was worried that I wouldn't have enough material, but the discussion has been really lively. I'm pleased. So I've told you a lot about Carl Sagan so far. I think he's was a very great science communicator, arguably one of the best science communicators ever. A few other things that I find very interesting about him. He was the co-founder of the Planetary Society, which was a vehicle for funding SETI, or the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, basically listening for alien signals, attempts of communication and so forth. He was also instrumental, along with his wife, Andrian, at designing and getting those gold records on the Voyager space probes, which contained instructions on how to use them and sounds from Earth, all kinds of information about humans, in case any aliens were to encounter the Voyager spacecraft at some point in the future. I remember the program no longer exists, but SETI actually used to have a distributed computing um, project called SETI at Home. When you download SETI at Home, and when you weren't using your computer, um, it would start to analyze signals that we were picking up from space to see if any of them might be extraterrestrial, in origin, from extraterrestrial life. That was really cool. I remember having that on my computer. And I was a member of the Planetary Society for a bit as well. I think I'd like to sign up again, because it funds this research. He was also an early advocate for fighting climate change. He was a proponent for nuclear disarmament. And he was a bit of a stoner. Um, it was not known until after his death, um, that Carl Sagan was the famous, or perhaps infamous, Mr. X. Um, Lester Grinspoon, a psychologist from Harvard, published a book um, called Marijuana Reconsidered. Yeah, maybe that's why. I mean, uh, according to Anne Druyan, his wife, Sagan did use cannabis when writing the Cosmos television series and the book, which I don't have with me, unfortunately. But I am the proud owner of a first edition hardcover of Carl Sagan's Cosmos that I got for like $2 at the Great Glebe garage sale one year. What a find that was. I don't think it's worth anything, but it's worth something to me, right? It's like a first edition. It's still got the dust jacket. It's got so many nice pictures and illustrations. It's just a great book. Um, and then I've got a couple other copies that I use for actually reading. Um, but anyway, yeah, Lester Grinspoon wrote this book, Marijuana Reconsidered, which took a critical look at the hysteria over cannabis use. There was a kind of moral panic in the United States after Prohibition. We had all of these people um, who had been administering, the or enforcing prohibition. Alcohol was illegal in the United States for a period in like the 30s or something. People would, of course, still drink it. They'd go to speakeasies and stuff, sort of secret clubs. And you could get a drink, you'd listen to jazz or dance to swing music. They were considered very debaucherous places. Um, but prohibition didn't work. A lot of people were getting poisoned from drinking like hard liquor that hadn't been distilled properly. When you brew alcohol, you get ethyl alcohol, which is the stuff that we drink for its intoxicating effect. But you also get like isopropyl alcohol, that is like rubbing alcohol, and that stuff. I mean, okay, ethyl alcohol is terrible for you. You know, it's quite literally a poison. But isopropyl alcohol will kill you a lot faster, right? So if you don't um, distill properly and you don't get rid of the isopropyl alcohol, you're going to kill someone. Um, that was happening. Stills were blowing up. Organized crime was producing a lot of the alcohol. Um, yeah, not good. So eventually they gave up on prohibition, but they had all of these people under the leadership of Harry Anslinger, who now were about to be out of a job. So what do? Well, they focus on cannabis. And that is actually how the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, came to be in the United States. Um, so now they were going after cannabis. Why were they going after cannabis? Um, Racism. A lot of it was racism. Um, Cannabis was predominantly used by Hispanic folks. I mean, that's where the name marijuana in Spanish just means Mary Jane. When we say, you're smoking the Mary Jane, I mean, come on, nobody says we're smoking the Mary Jane anymore. But back in the day when people said that, it was just because, that's what it means. Marijuana means Mary Jane. Um, so, farm workers and stuff, a lot of undocumented workers, or even just Americans, because Texas, New Mexico, all that whole area used to be Mexico. Um, uh, so, a lot of those folks would use cannabis as a way to kick back and relax after a hard day's work. Um, Cannabis was also used by a lot of African Americans. So it had this association with jazz. Um, and again, this was considered at the time, owing to sort of racist attitudes, this was considered immoral, kind of debaucherous, not just the cannabis use, but also the jazz, right? Um, you know, uh, so you get a kind of moral panic going about cannabis, uh, which still, I guess, in some senses is with us to this day. Um, But Grinspoon is writing in the 60s, and he had Sagan write a little essay that goes into that book and you can read the essay if you want. Sagan is, I am an American academic. I'm an astronomer, and I use cannabis. And he talks all about like all of the benefits of cannabis. Not that cannabis is perfectly safe. Obviously, if you're smoking it, that's not good for your lungs. It's certainly not a harmless substance. It's arguably much less harmful than alcohol, but it's not harmless. Um, if you have a sort of a genetic predisposition to schizophrenia or psychosis, then overuse of cannabis can trigger that. Use of cannabis, like any other drug, can have a very bad effect on a developing brain. So you probably shouldn't use cannabis or anything until you're into your 20s. Not that your brain actually stops developing. There's a kind of myth that it stops developing at 25. That's not true. The brain never stops changing. But you should probably wait until you're an adult if you want to try some of this. Uh, but don't do drugs, okay? That's my official advice. Um, but yeah, go read the Mr. X essay. It's really cool. And you can definitely see, when Sagan's, I don't know if he's stoned in the documentary, but yeah, when he's like, we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. Like, yeah, that's totally something you would think of when you're, smoking the reefer, right? So very cool. Sagan also was not just a science popularizer. He actually made very important contributions to planetary astronomy, starting with his PhD thesis. Most people's PhD thesis sit on a shelf. Sagan's actually did something. Sagan discussed how you could use spectroscopy to understand the compositions of like the atmospheres of different planets to possibly look for life signs. So by looking at the light reflected off the planets, certain frequencies of light are reflected and are absorbed by different chemical compounds. So by looking at the spectrograph, a measure of EM radiation reflected from a planet or from a star or a nebula or wherever, we can tell what it's made of. So Sagan did some interesting stuff with that. And maybe you'd never seen Cosmos before. Maybe you'd never heard of Carl Sagan, but I'm sure you heard of Bill Nye the Science Guy. I'm sure you've heard of Neil deGrasse Tyson. Carl Sagan was their astronomy professor at Cornell University, which I think is very cool. I saw Bill Nye speak in 2010 or 2011 at the University of Ottawa, and I wanted to ask him what that was like having Carl Sagan for your astronomy professor. But the lineup for the microphone to ask a question was so long, I didn't get the chance. But if I ever do see Bill Nye again anywhere, I am going to ask him that. As you know, he's also a skeptic and a buster of malarkey, a challenger of pseudoscience, if you like. And he describes an alien abduction in our reading for this week. He says, "It's still dark out." I'm going to try not to do it in the Carl Sagan voice, but I might slip into it. "It's still dark out. You're lying in bed, fully awake. You discover you're utterly paralyzed. You sense someone in the room. You try to cry out. You cannot. Several small gray beings, less than 4 feet tall, are standing at the foot of your bed. Their heads are pear-shaped, bald, and large for their bodies. Their eyes are enormous, their faces expressionless and identical. They wear tunics and boots. You hope this is only a dream, but as nearly as you can tell, it's really happening. They lift you up and eerily they make you slip through the wall of your bedroom. You float out into the air. You rise high toward a metallic saucer-shaped spacecraft. Once inside, you are escorted into a medical examining room. A larger but similar being, evidently some kind of physician, takes over. What follows is even more terrifying, and that's when all of the probing and sexual abuse occurs, right? Do I believe in aliens? I have mentioned this before. Um, but I think out of all of the paranormal phenomena that we're discussing in this class, I think that alien life is the most likely thing to be true, to be real. I do. The reason is that the universe is so big. Just seems like it would be an awful waste of space if we were the only ones. Does that mean the alien life is going to be intelligent or humanoid on travel in flying saucers? No, I don't necessarily believe that. Like I said earlier in the lecture, I think the first extraterrestrial life we are likely to find might be like microbes or weird plants or some kind of weird life in some sort of alien ocean. Maybe in the oceans of Saturn moons Enceladus, right? Or there are volcanoes on like some of the moons of Jupiter. On Earth we have life forms that live in undersea volcanoes. These kinds of extremophiles that they can deal with the crazy pH and the high temperature and the incredible pressure down there, and they live on these volcanic vents and they like it. Maybe some kind of life like that exists on another planet in our solar system. I actually had a very interesting paper in this class. It was last year that dealt with biomarkers in the atmosphere of the planet Venus. Um, so I think, yeah, something like that almost certainly exists. And I think probably there could be some intelligent life out there somewhere. I just don't think they're abducting people and probing them, right? But yeah, this is a description of, an experience that quite a lot of people have reported. It might be explained by sleep paralysis. And we've talked about sleep paralysis before, and we might talk about it again in future, so I don't have too many details here for you.
Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand, but
Oh,
since
go
you said
ahead.
Yeah, since you said like the universe is so big, do you think there's like other people somewhere?
Um, Not humans, but
Okay.
persons, perhaps, like,
Yeah.
um,
Like
I
other
mean,
life?
yeah, like other life, like maybe not, like they wouldn't be humans, but they would be persons in the philosophical sense. Like they would be autonomous individuals with interests and with moral status and so forth. So they would be persons, but not, I don't think they'd look like us though, right?
And like you think they have like their own like communities in a way, like they live in house. I don't know, because every time like I see something about that, it's so like weird. I can't imagine like other like it took humans so long to get to where we are. I can't imagine it happening somewhere else.
Yeah, well, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the Drake equation.
Okay.
But yeah, I think the reason why we imagine aliens being humanoid is maybe because it's difficult to imagine something so vastly different. But yeah,
Yeah.
I have no idea. I think there might be some intelligent life out there, but no idea what it might look like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, no, good question. But if you have an experience like the one Sagan describes, you might be undergoing sleep paralysis. So, oh, Holly had or sleep paralysis. Super scary. Demons, not aliens. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people have that. So how does it come to occur? Well, so every night, and if we do a lecture on dreams, I'll cover this in much more detail. Ooh, geez. Yeah. Ooh, creepy. Demon touched you. Yeah. Um, so we go through various phases of sleep every night. From non-REM sleep, which is like a deep sleep, to REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement. And that's the time during which we have dreams. So the brain, when it's in REM sleep, is nearly as active as it is when we're awake. Because when the brain is awake, one of the things that it's doing is constructing a mental representation of the external world, right? So this coffee cup, right? Is this a coffee cup? Well, what I'm seeing in front of me and what I'm feeling in my hand is actually a mental representation of a coffee cup. I don't have direct sensory contact with the coffee cup. It's my brain's mental representation. Um, I'll come back to the lizard people in a second, Sarah. um, so the brain is doing that when you're dreaming too, which is why you have visual and auditory and tactile sensations when you dream. But when you're asleep, you're not in sensory contact with the world. So the brain builds this off of memories and expectations and things like that, as opposed to modeling the world itself. But sometimes something curious can happen. You know, the brain is very active in REM sleep, with the exception of certain areas in the prefrontal cortex, which is probably, you know, this is the part of the brain that we use for reasoning, planning, etc. And the fact that the frontal cortex is a bit less active during dreams might be why we don't recognize dreams as so strange while we're having them. Um, but in any case, you have a very active brain, but the body is kind of paralyzed because something happens in the brain stem such that nerve signals don't actually make it to the muscles. So you might twitch and move about a little bit in a dream. Um, and you'll breathe, and of course, your heart will continue moving. Your eyes will move. And it turns out that how your eyes move actually matches up with where you're looking in the dream. Um, but sometimes you can kind of wake up and you'll be awake, but still in REM sleep at the same time. So your body will be paralyzed. You're awake, but also still dreaming. Um, and that's sleep paralysis, and it can be quite frightening. I haven't really had it happen to me, although it would be interesting to see what it's like. Um, but people report all kinds of interesting experiences, which I think can be explained as episodes of sleep paralysis. One of them is, of course, being abducted by aliens. Um, if you read accounts of people who are abducted in this way, it's straightforwardly sleep paralysis. They report that they're unable to move, and sometimes that they feel a weight on their chest. Um, that's very similar to just, sort of humdrum reports of sleep paralysis. And of course, the aliens can be explained as dreams or hallucinations. And by the time you get abducted and taken up into their spaceship, probably what's happened is that you've fallen back asleep and you are now in a dream, a very vivid dream of being abducted. This could explain other things too. Like I had my high school sweetheart, right? Was very spiritual, in the sense that she believed in psychics and ghosts and lots of stuff. And she told me the story that her mom told her, where she had an encounter. She believed she had an encounter with a ghost of her father. It happened when she was sleeping. She woke up, couldn't move, but she could feel a presence. That's another thing that's associated with sleep paralysis. And then she heard his voice whispering in his ear and could smell like alcohol because he was a drinker. So he could smell like his breath and hear him whispering. And she believed that that was the ghost of her father. I said, I think it's sleep paralysis, and she didn't like that. That's not why we broke up or anything, but I was a skeptic. She was a believer. And I always remember that story because it sounded to me like sleep paralysis. There's also the old hag phenomenon from medieval Europe. People would wake up and claim that they were visited by a demon, usually an incubus or a succubus. So an incubus is a male demon who preys on the vital energies of women, and the succubus is the female version. So they come and basically sexually assault you in the night. And it was believed these were real demons who were visiting people, frightening them, taking advantage of them, and so forth. Um, I've just recently noticed on social media these sleep paralysis demon memes, right? Like people will share like, "Oh, my sleep paralysis demon is such and such," right? And they try and come up with something funny. My sleep paralysis demon is actually this, it's not very funny, but or not very scary. It's just this it's whatever humorous example that they come up with, right? That's a way of explaining naturalistically this sort of anomalous experience, sleep paralysis. Oh, nice. I don't think I read yours, but that's definitely a good topic, Camilla, for a reflection like that one. Or maybe I did. I don't remember whose ones I marked. Um, Lizard people. Yeah, lizard people are weird. Coming back to the lizard people stuff. I guess the person responsible for popularizing this is David Icke. Oh yeah, Jack. Yeah, RTA Jack. Um, oh, by the way, if anyone has questions about that assignment, I think we all signed off, who marked what. So if you have any questions or anything like that, reach out to me, Jack, or Zainab, depending on who marked your thingy. Hmm. Oh, interesting. Your sleep paralysis demon is a demon, but it's not but yeah, from I haven't seen Disenchantment, but I've heard of it. So yeah, I expect he'd be more funny. Um um where was it? Oh, reptiles, the reptilians. Yeah. This was popularized by a guy from the UK named David Icke. He's a conspiracy theorist. His original claim to fame was actually, it's actually really interesting. He went on live television claiming that he was a reincarnation of Jesus Christ. And when that didn't catch on, he pivoted to lizard people. And now he writes all about how every famous or powerful person is actually a reptilian shapeshifter. Um, so yeah. Very weird. But I guess the whole Jesus thing didn't work. I mean, there are some people who there's a guy in Russia somewhere that has a cult and he's got all his believers believing that he is another incarnation of Jesus Christ. Um, very interesting. But David Icke tried it, kind of got laughed out of the room, and then returned with his whole reptilian hypothesis. So, yeah, uh, very, very strange. So yeah, sleep paralysis could explain something like this. And I challenge you to go and read accounts of abductions that happen at night or watch again, like I know there's one example is there's an episode of Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix if you have Netflix. One of them deals with alien abduction and it certainly sounds according to the guy's testimony that what he experienced was sleep paralysis. So again, there is a more naturalistic, more parsimonious explanation. Does that mean that no one's been abducted by aliens ever? I don't know. We can't make that claim. We can't know that. But we can know that it's much more likely that the majority of these experiences are a result of sleep paralysis, not actual alien abduction. You might recall being abducted by aliens or encountering aliens under hypnosis. And this is what happened with the Hills, with Betty and Barney Hill, which Sagan discusses at length in that documentary. Who watched it? I hope you all did. But did you check out that episode of Cosmos? Excellent. Oh, good. Thank you. Belle, Holly, Leo, Martha. Yeah, I like that episode. It's a great episode. Because he doesn't even spend that much time on aliens. He spends a lot of time on how you could communicate with a life that is so vastly different. And he uses the example of Champollion uh, decrypting the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, right? So he's communicating, or not communicating with, but he's able to read the language of a people that's separated by time, a vastly different culture than the one he found himself in. How would we do that if there were aliens out there? And the answer is physics, math, right? The laws of physics are the same everywhere in the universe. Math works the same everywhere in the universe. So how do we tell people we're here? We use that. How would we know a signal is definitely artificial? Well, if it was a series of prime numbers, right? There's no natural phenomenon that generates prime numbers. Um, there are surprisingly regular signals that we receive from outer space. These come from stars called pulsars. These are neutron stars. So if you have a star with a great amount of mass, not enough mass to become a black hole, but more mass than our sun, when that star dies and goes, supernova, what you have left over is a neutron star, which is basically all neutrons. Everything else is squeezed out. Neutron stars are incredibly dense. Um, a spoonful of neutron star matter on Earth would weigh as much as like a freight train, right? It's incredibly dense. There's a new Superman movie coming out, right? It seems to be based a lot on the All-Star Superman, the All-Star Superman story. Jack, our TA, is going to like this one. He likes comic books. Um, but anyway, in that All-Star Superman, Superman's taken Lois Lane to the Fortress of Solitude, and he's got like a key under the mat at the door for the Fortress of Solitude. Like, oh yeah, Superman just leaves a key under his welcome mat to get in. And he just picks it up and opens it. But he explains to Lois, like, oh, I made this key out of neutron star matter. Nobody else could lift this. It's like a key that weighs as much as a locomotive. But anyway, these neutron stars, if they rotate very rapidly, and if they are rotate on a very extreme axis, then what we see is like a beam of radiation pulsing, like several times a second. And these are called pulsars when these neutron stars spin very quickly like this. And when we first detected pulsars, these pulses were so regular and so perfect, we thought they might have been signals from extraterrestrial life forms. Turns out, naturalistic explanation. It's pulsars, rapidly spinning neutron stars. And again, they're so massive yet so small. Like a pulsar would be, smaller than the planet Earth, but with much, much more mass than the Earth. That's why they spin so fast. Um, um, Thought maybe they could be extraterrestrials. Likewise with quasars. Quasars are quasi-stellar radio objects. They emitted such powerful radiation that it was thought maybe they could be signals from aliens. What they actually are really active galaxies. You know how galaxies like ours have black holes in the center. So these are images we're seeing from many, many billions of years ago, because they're so far away, of very old galaxies when there was still a lot of matter falling into the black holes at their center. Um, so again, thought maybe it was aliens, but turned out to be a naturalistic explanation. Um, but prime numbers, if you were to receive a series of prime numbers, one, neither zero nor prime, what's the next one? I'm going to test your math knowledge. Two, correct. What's the next one? Yep. What's after that? Mm-hmm. What's after five? Now here's the tricky part. What's after seven? 11 is the best prime number, because it's the only prime number where both numerals are the same. And then you go on and on and on, 13, 17, etc., etc. There's no natural process that produces series of prime numbers like this. So if you were to get a signal like bum, 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 you would have to conclude it is artificial. And that's quite cool. And then maybe buried within that code could be information, like we could tell them what we know, or they might tell us what we know, like, hey, hydrogen has one proton, helium two, et cetera, et cetera. We could start communicating knowledge about the natural world that we figured out, and that's how we would know we were talking to somebody who was trying to reach out, right? Um, Hypnosis. The Hills, right? I'm getting back to the Hills. Betty and Barney Hill um, were driving home from a vacation in Canada, and they seemed to lose time. They lost time. We don't know if they fell asleep. Hopefully, they weren't driving, but maybe they fell asleep while driving or pulled over and had a nap, or sometimes you succumb to like road hypnosis, right? Where you're kind of on automatic pilot. And this can happen with any sort of expertise, right? Where you do things more or less automatically without conscious control. But think about it. Has this ever happened to you where you get in the car and you're driving and maybe you're talking to a friend in the passenger seat? Maybe you're listening to the radio or to a podcast or whatever. And before you know it, you're at your destination and you're like, wow, where did the time go? Um, you just kind of got there automatically, right? Maybe something like that happened to the Hills. We don't know, but they seem to have lost time. They seem to have got a gap in their memory. Weeks after this incident, they went to a hypnotist who helped them recall their experience of being abducted by aliens, seeing the spaceship in front of them. They stopped, they got out of the car, taken up into the spaceship, shown around a little bit, and then brought back to Earth. I like the way Sagan does this in Cosmos because, we can see that they have a little dog with them, and the dog is like, huh? Oh, my humans are being abducted by aliens? Okay. Um, and the dog was fine. I guess the dog wasn't taken up into the spaceship, but Uh, so were the hills really abducted? Well, probably not. The problem is false memory syndrome, right? When you are trying to recover memories with hypnosis, oftentimes we don't end up recovering actual memories at all. But what happens is that a memory is actually implanted by the hypnotist. And your mind kind of takes that and builds a false memory of it. And I think a lot of people are under the mistaken impression that memory is not very malleable, right? Memory is quite malleable. Over time, your memories, something happens to your memories called semanticization. When we initially form episodic memories, like memories of episodes that happen to us, those are stored in the hippocampus. But over time, gradually, the memories are consolidated, which means those memory representations, the configurations of all your neurons and everything, they actually change from the hippocampus to other areas of the cortex. And when that happens, we can actually lose a lot of the experiential detail of the memory. So, for example, I remember that when I was a little guy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, my parents took me to Marineland. Now, I'm sorry. I was like 4 or 5 years old. Marineland is an awful place, okay? I hate it. They got those poor whales and everything in there. Terrible. I think it's shut down, actually, because of animal welfare concerns, right? Somebody confirmed that. Yeah, Kaya, yes, yeah, that's right. It's shut down. Yeah, or maybe very dead. I know that if it's not completely shut down, at least parts of it are. Um, and the sad thing is, a lot of these marine parks that do shut down, they don't take the whales back to the ocean. They just kind of leave them there, and someone comes in and feeds them, and so it's not enough that these places shut down. These whales need to be released or placed into like sanctuaries. You know, it's not enough to just shut them down. But I believe like whales are highly intelligent, dolphins are highly intelligent, highly emotional beings that have the freedom of the ocean. They should not be kept in these horrible places. So I'm sorry, I went to Marineland. I've never been back, okay? I've never been back, and I never would go back. I never would go. Even those dolphin encounters in the ocean, I don't like because the dolphins are not in a tank, but they're in a big old sea pen, and it's still, oh, it just breaks my heart. Yeah, yeah, like the Soviets shot the dogs into space, like Laika and Balka and Stralka and all those poor puppers. Well, they may be evil, Fern, they may be evil, but they also might be persons, right? They're certainly moral patients. But I mean, killer whales are technically dolphins, and do you see what they do? They'll go after your yacht, they'll go after your penguins, they'll murder seals, they'll kill other whales, they will kill great white sharks. Don't mess with orcas. They call them sea wolves for a reason, right? Deadly. They do eat these things. In fact, they really like the livers of the sharks. But they eat the birds, they eat the penguins, they eat the seals. Yeah, they eat all of them. Oh, Will, thank you for that. Yeah, closed indefinitely. And that came today. Yeah. And yeah, Sarah, you're right. They have never killed humans. Oh, you're so lucky, Zach. My partner went whale watching out in the St. Lawrence. And she saw belugas and humpbacks. No orcas though. But we would really like to go out to Vancouver, try and see some orcas out there. Yeah, maybe dolphins are evil. Yeah, that's true, and they do drugs too. The devil's pufferfish. So yeah, justice for the whales and dolphins and all of the cetaceans. Um, so I go to marine land. I'm sorry for this tangent, okay? I'm sorry. Um, oh, seals, neat. Yeah. Yeah, we should leave animals alone. I've got to do better at this. I've been trying to eat less meat, you know. I still eat it, but I try to eat less of it. Um, so why am I going on this huge marine land tangent? Okay, so I know that I went there. I remember that I went there, but I only remember snippets of it now. I remember they had these tiny deer. I remember the bears, and you'd get pellets and throw them. And I remember a killer whale splashing somebody in the big tank. And I remember getting an inflatable killer whale as a souvenir. But that's all I remember, right? I remember that I was there, but the actual episodic portions of my memory are quite limited. And that's because those memories have been semanticized. I've kind of lost the episodic side, and now they're simply declarative memories. Like, yes, I went to Marineland when I was 5, right? Um, oh my goodness, your dog sounds like a ninja. My cat almost caught a squirrel when I was up in North Bay. I just got back yesterday, but I was up at my partner's parents' place, and my kitty, um, the one with hyperthyroidism, right? I think I was telling you about that. He's been on his medication and he's putting on weight because he had lost some muscle mass before. But I thought, oh, it'd probably be okay if I let him in the backyard under supervision so that he can get some exercise and some fresh air. And, he just likes it out there. And he sees this little red squirrel and takes off after it like he was never sick. He didn't catch it, but he almost did. I'm glad he didn't because, I don't condone squirrel murder. And also he's overdue for his vaccines, so I don't want him to get him rabies or anything. But it was nice to see him like active again, I suppose is what I'm saying. Oh no, yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad the bunny was okay. But that is what the orcas do with their prey. They play with it, like a cat plays with a mouse or a dog with a bunny, right? And so, yeah, your memories are semanticized. So just on that basis alone, right? Memories seem to change. Memories also can be modified every time we recollect them, right? That's why we misremember things. Like I misremember things from time to time. I actually have a pretty decent memory. I've got this weird splinter skill where my partner will lose something. Like last time it was her earrings. It was the morning that I was coming back here and she was getting up early for work and I had to get up early because I wanted to say goodbye and see her off before I caught my ride down here. And she's trying to get ready and she's like, "Oh, where are my earrings? I can't find my earrings that I was wearing." That they had the Leafs and I was half asleep. I was just like on the side table on the couch downstairs near the fireplace. And she looks at me and she's like, "Who are you?" I said, "Oh, I'm sleepy." Anyway, that's where the earrings were. I just see it, like it's just like, "Hey, I can't find this." And it's like, boom. Oh, it's over there, I can't control it. Um, but that's the skill. Uh, but I do misremember things. Sometimes I do misremember things. Oh no, I know where they are because I saw them there. And it's just a skill. I don't know if it's because of my brain or because I've inadvertently trained myself to do it. It's not magic. It's not ESP. Okay, it's definitely not that. Um, but it's like it's just a weird random skill I have. Yeah. So yeah, I should say. Oh, are the hills? They both had sleep paralysis? No, I don't think it was sleep paralysis with the hills. I think it was simply false memory syndrome. Um, yes, well, that we'll get to that, Holly, but that is a good question. Yeah, the tiniest, yeah, it's an ADHD. The funny thing is, like, my partner is ADHD, and that's why she's always misplacing stuff. Um, I don't know why, I don't know why I'm good at finding stuff. I don't know what that says about me. I know my partner's neurodivergent and we get on quite well. That's all I'll say about that. But I do have these weird memory things I can do, which are handy. But it's not magic, okay? It's not ESP or clairvoyance. It's just some weird splinter skill I have. Um, so yeah, the sleep paralysis. Holly says, how could they both have sleep paralysis? Well, it's not that they both did, but they both recalled similar memories. Their recollected memories were not identical though, and that's the thing. So it's not like it was the exact same memory that was implanted. Um, Barney seemed to remember going up into the ship. Betty remembered being shown around the ship and being shown like star charts, kind of like the one Sagan shows in that episode, right? And that's the one that ufologists kind of seized on to say that this really happened because they were able to find a sort of not a perfect match, but an interestingly close match to actual star positions. Um, that's probably just pareidolia. And you can watch that section of the documentary to see what I mean. But if we just change the configuration of the lines, it looks completely different. On the lines on the star charts, I mean. Yeah, Martha, no problem. I'm glad you enjoyed it. How are we for time? Okay, we still have a bit of time. Well, maybe, yeah. I don't know if he suggested alien abduction, but he said, okay, you're back in the car. Tell me what you see. I see a light. Okay. What's the light doing? Oh, it's landing. Oh, it's a craft. And your mind is building this memory of an experience that never happened thanks to the prompting of the hypnotist, right? Um, I got to go back a slide because I accidentally changed the slides. This false memory syndrome stuff, explains a lot of weird, freaky phenomena. Um, the satanic panic, which is also maybe a cool special topics idea, was sparked by the publication of a book called Michelle Remembers by Lawrence Pasder, who was a Catholic psychotherapist, and his patient and later wife, Michelle Smith. So right off the bat, super unethical. You don't marry your patients, okay? Because there's a power imbalance. So it is never ethical if you're a medical practitioner or anything like that to get together with a patient while they are your patient. That aside, it seems to have played a role in the satanic panic because Michelle Smith, under hypnosis, recalled episodes of satanic ritual abuse. Basically, it was like these gruesome episodes where she seemed to recall being abused by Satanists physically and sexually, being made to drink blood or other fluids. Um, you know, uh, all of this never happened, but it sparked off this satanic panic, which combined with a lot of other factors, like there was a sexual abuse panic going on at daycares in North America, also due in large part to false memory syndrome. Teachers were being accused of sexual abuse when there was no physical evidence because people were recalling experiences under hypnosis. Um, of course, this was also the new wave of British heavy metal. So Iron Maiden had songs like The Number of the Beast, which are quite campy when you look back on them. But, The Number of a Beast, that's a real banger. It's about a man who witnesses some kind of satanic ritual. But of course, people panic about this music, and they say that heavy metal is itself satanic. It's not. At least most of it isn't. Maybe some Norwegian black metal is. But even the satanic metal isn't like, yay, Satan. It's like, oh, we're slave to Satan. We're slaves to Satan. Everything sucks. What do we do? It's all darkness, you know. So even the satanic metal isn't like pro Satan. It's like, doesn't it suck how we're all enslaved by the beast? Yeah, it sucks, right? So Satanic Panic over heavy metal, Dungeons and Dragons, um, you know, Dungeons and Dragons was associated with black magic and Satanism. It's incredibly silly when we look back on it now, but it was a huge deal. Thousands of people were implicated with accusations of satanic ritual abuse. Not one case was ever shown to have really happened. And just to illustrate like how far this panic went, police departments had training videos on how to detect signs of satanic ritual abuse, even though no cases were ever confirmed, no one was ever prosecuted for this. It never happened. There was no satanic ritual abuse. But it all gets traced back to Michelle Remembers, and her memories were arguably the result of false memory syndrome. Something similar can happen, which explains testimonial evidence of alien abduction. So, one other thing Sagan says in this chapter is he talks about just how high belief in aliens and in alien abductions is. I think the number was from a Rupert poll. 6,000 Americans were surveyed, and something like 18% of them believed that they had been abducted, which is quite high. But as Sagan says here, if we believe the conclusions drawn by those who bankrolled and interpreted the results of this poll, and if aliens are not partial to Americans, then the number for the whole planet would be more than 100 million people. This means an abduction every few seconds over the past few decades. It's surprising more of the neighbors haven't noticed. And yeah, he's exactly right. Especially, keep in mind, Sagan is writing this. This is the 90s, pre-smartphone, even pre-digital camera, even. So, um, if the rate of abduction were consistent through the decades up till now in 2025, we should expect to see a lot more video evidence and photographic evidence for UAPs. What we do have is interesting, but again, a lot of it can be, it's not that it's, unexplainable. Not all of it is. Some of it is defies explanation, but most of it is explainable as either natural or artificial phenomena, including camera artifacts and sensor artifacts. Yeah, the fact is that we should have a lot more evidence than we have if this is really happening. Um, for abductions and UAP sightings. So I guess there's not much time left, right? But any thoughts about the documentary, right? He goes over the Hill abduction case, talks about the hieroglyphics, talks about the Drake equation, talks about using natural scientific knowledge and mathematical knowledge as a sort of Rosetta Stone for communicating with alien life. I think that's very cool. Um, yeah, Leo, I think that's exactly what happened with the hills. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see your question there in time. I think that's exactly what happens. Um, I think we can probably wrap it up unless you all have some thoughts you want to share. We can talk a little bit about the preliminary report on UAPs, which I've put on Brightspace. Read through it. It's very cool. Um, and check this out, how to fake a UFO on your own time. It's also quite cool. These guys faked a UFO using nothing but helium balloons and flares, and it went viral. and expert ufologists were convinced that it was a real alien craft, not fakery. So definitely check that out. They got into a little bit of trouble. I think they got charged with mischief and they had to do like some community service, but I don't know. Totally worth it if you ask me. Um, yeah, the Drake equation. So the Drake equation is really cool, devised by Frank Drake, and it's a way of estimating the possible number of alien civilizations. And depending how you tweak your parameters, the number could be as low as one, that's us, or it could be into the thousands or millions. Very fascinating. And if you write a paper on aliens or UFOs or UAPs, you should absolutely talk about the Drake equation a little bit because there are real scientific efforts to search for extraterrestrial life. Of all of the things we're studying in this class, this is the thing that's the most likely to turn out to be real. Will it happen in our lifetimes? I don't know. Will it be intelligent humanoid aliens or slime mold growing in an underground cave on Mars? I don't know. But extraterrestrial life is probably the most plausible of all of the paranormal phenomena that we're looking at here. I don't really have much else to talk about today. I'm sorry, everybody, for all the tangents I went on today, talking about whales and splinter skills and other things. But I hope you found this fun, and I was really glad to see so much participation in the chat from all of you. So that's great. Let's keep that up. Yeah, I agree, Holly. Like, they are taking this seriously because and it makes sense like even if these UAPs are predominantly natural or artificial phenomena, well, if they're artificial, that what are they? Are they like some kind of advanced technology developed by an enemy nation, right? Like one thing I meant to talk about earlier that I didn't was in the course of our discussion of advanced aircraft, so a lot of people say UFOs don't move like aircraft do. And I was thinking about this because recently I've been kind of on like an airplane tangent. I've been going down an airplane rabbit hole where all of a sudden I'm super interested in airplanes. And I've been really getting into like watching footage of super maneuverable aircraft at air shows. So super maneuverable aircraft are really neat. They've got like thrust vectoring and all this cool stuff. And when they do these maneuvers, it's not like they're flying like a plane. It's like they're floating like a leaf in the wind. It's spectacular. So imagine if you saw something like that and you didn't know what it was. You might think it was a UFO. Um, Skinwalker Ranch. No, I don't know about that. What's that? Tell us more, Holly. Okay. Maybe you know what? I could just look into it. Oh, it's a show. Okay. I'll tell you what. I'll look into it. Um, but yeah, these things, if these UAPs are artificial, they could be being developed by, maybe it's advanced technology developed in an adversarial nation. Um, oh, interesting. Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out then. Um, so yeah, even if these are artifacts, they might be terrestrial. They might be extraterrestrial. Either way, we probably want to know more about them, right? Um, so I'll have to check out Skinwalker Ranch for sure. Maybe that's what I can do tonight. I need to do something. Looking for new stuff to watch. And I can't just watch footage of airplanes at air shows all day long, even though that is quite fun. Um, oh, so there's a lot. Where can I watch this? Is it on a streaming service? I will. I can ignore the dramatic music. Oh, thank you. Yeah, you know what? Why don't you drop that link in the Discord server for us, Holly? And maybe if someone else is interested, they can check it out as well. All right, thank you. Okay, so that means the last thing before we go, special topics. Guys, I really need some suggestions. I put out the call for suggestions on Monday, and I got nothing. I really need some because otherwise it's going to be limited to this. So as I said before, we could do dreams, which would be quite comprehensive. We'd talk about lucid dreaming primarily, but also a little more about sleep paralysis and maybe out of body experiences and astral projection. Canadian cryptozoology. Someone on the Discord server suggested legendary creatures, like that overlap with indigenous folklore. I think my Canadian cryptozoology lecture already kind of does that. And I don't want to be appropriative as well. Like, not only is my knowledge of indigenous folklore incredibly limited, but also some of that knowledge is supposed to remain esoteric, if you know what I mean. It's not for me as an outsider. Like, I'm not indigenous, so I don't want to give you a lecture on Wendigos when you're not supposed to talk about Wendigos, right? I don't want to do that. I also, but Sasquatch, aka Bigfoot, did grow out of indigenous folklore, so I can at least kind of cover that in my Bigfoot lecture. And then the ethics of belief would be cool. We would talk about maybe William K. Clifford versus William James, who differ on their they differ about when it is appropriate to believe in something without evidence. Clifford says it is never ethical to believe in anything without evidence, and James says it can be ethical in certain circumstances. And I think that applies to this class. Dreams in cryptozoology. Oh, the skinwalker. Yeah, the skinwalker's a cryptid. It's like a shapeshifter, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah, dreams. Yeah, Zach, I love the dream lecture. Possession might be a bit difficult, but that is an idea. And dreams. A lot of people want dreams. So, okay, I'll take note of possession and I've done satanic panic in the past, so maybe I could combine uh I could do a little possession, a little exorcism, and a little satanic panic. So that could be possible. So maybe later today or tomorrow I'll get a poll going. And then you can vote for your favorite topic, and I'll lecture on the two most popular topics. Okay, guess that's it. We're out of time. This was another fun one. Again, sorry for my digressions. I was riffing a lot today, but I think we had a lot of productive and inquisitive discussion in the chat. So thank you again for that. I had loads of fun with this one. And I'll see you all next week on Monday, where I guess we'll talk about one of these or something else. Um, so we'll see you then. Have a good weekend, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.